I do want to introduce one of my esteemed colleagues, Rudy Tank. He is the market manager for heavy equipment and distribution. So without further ado, Rudy, I will kick it over to you.
Great. All right, so what does heavy equipment consist of? Basically, it's construction, ag, forestry, mining, and highway construction equipment. You know, at this point, my customers are seeing build schedules remaining strong across most of the segments. Customers are sold out through 2022, and a lot of them have backlogs out into 2023. That's the good news. The flip side of that is the reason those lead times are so extended is because they've got skilled labor and supply chain gaps. And really the biggest driver within that is probably the skilled labor side. So we've kind of transitioned from back in 2021 when it was a lot of the material side was the constraint. We're now in a labor situation. The one thing that's kind of changed this year, I'm seeing issues with more kind of specific components, or whereas last year it was more general commodities. Last year they couldn't get steel to make something. Now they're more missing a specific item within the realm. So that's kind of been a change. And what's resulted from that is customers are looking for a lot more flexibility within their supply chain, because as they're having a gap in their bill of material, they're switching their build schedule. So they're looking to their suppliers to be able to adjust accordingly. The other thing I've seen a lot of coming in to the heavy side is autonomous operation. It's been in the mining side for years. We're now seeing it come into agriculture and construction. We're seeing new technologies that are, the existing companies are acquiring some of those companies and adding it into their product mix. And then we're also just having new companies come in with merging new technology. And so it's really been an exciting time seeing what's going on in this market at this point. Most of those changes are being driven by either the labor shortage in the end market, or environmental concerns, or greenification. Excuse me.
Hey, Rudy, question for you.
Yes,
Do you
sir.
think, on the heavy equipment side, as we think about, you know, the infrastructure bill that was passed and some of these large projects that may be coming down the pipeline, are you seeing, you know, kind of a preparation process amongst the heavy equipment manufacturers to kind of get ready for that, or is it mostly business as usual at this stage?
I would say it's more business as usual. I do think there's some equipment growth within that. At the same time, from the construction side, they've got skilled labor shortages to be able to do the projects. So you've got a couple things. One, it takes a lead time for those projects to come on stream. And then you put in the skilled labor shortage, so it's kind of throttling it back a little bit. But is that part of the reason we've got extended lead times out through this year into next year? Yes, I would say it's absolutely a contributing factor.
Okay.
All right, we'll transition over to distribution systems. Distribution systems, what we kind of call it is any equipment that would go into an e-commerce or a retail distribution center. So it can go from conveyors to lift trucks to racking, doors, dock levelers. And then what I'm seeing the real growth in lately is AMRs, the autonomous mobile robots. So when I look at 2022 versus end of 2021 or 2021, the elephant in the room had a big impact. Amazon started pushing back some of their first half business into second half of 2022. And now we're seeing there could be some of the second half 2022 gets pushed back into 2023. So that kind of cooled off this whole market. When you look back a year ago, there were some commodity sizes that were just almost impossible to get because they were common across all conveyor manufacturers. So that part is kind of settled down. But really where the growth is kind of coming, what I'm seeing is just the whole advent of these autonomous mobile robots. And as the size and weight of the product they can move is increasing, and then also the way they're being utilized. So you've got manufacturers of those that some make their own equipment, others partner up with an existing manufacturer and are adding their product onto it. So if I look at both my verticals, I think the one thing I'm really seeing for both of them is a lot of dependence on value-added processing. Manufacturers in both of these have trouble servicing the peaks when they occur, and both of these have been cyclical in that nature. So when I'm out there working with customers, not only is it raw material, but it's also a lot of value-add processing that we're bringing to the table. And that's
Rudy,
pretty much. Yep.
You mentioned the Amazon side of things. We've actually talked on Cup of Joe in prior months about Amazon specifically, and one of their recent announcements about how they were going to, I think they specifically mentioned they were going to sell off like 10 million square feet of warehouse space. Do you feel that within the distribution world is Amazon being as large as they are from a market cap standpoint? Do you think there's kind of concentration risk in this world to an Amazon type entity, or is there enough to go around, I guess?
What's been interesting, and as I got into this, it goes back now about 18 months ago, seeing the impact that an Amazon has had on the way Walmart and Target and other companies have done their business. What's going to be interesting is as you read about Amazon, kind of the labor issues they're having or rumored to be having are having a big impact in their trying to automate their processes. They've got their own robotics company, so they're trying to kind of address that. But I do think scaling back their facilities definitely, in my mind, kind of says they're taking a look at their business model and its existing form.
Sure. Yeah, it's an interesting topic because I'd say 2-3 years ago when warehouse workers maybe were making $10 to $15 to $20 an hour, perhaps automation or the speed of automation made less sense. Fast forward to where we are today when we've got real labor issues where even at $25-30 an hour, maybe you can't find the people. Just seems like it speeds up that discussion towards robotics, automation, distribution, things like that.
Exactly.
Hey, Rudy, has transportation been an issue in this space? It's a question from our audience.
As to the logistics of moving from location to location, I would say yes. I mean, they've had supply chain issues within their distribution networks, just like we have. But at the same time, and Amanda will talk a little bit to it, there's just so much push for the last mile. How do you get the product delivered? And it really is going to be interesting to see how kind of what this industry looks like 2 years from now. So it's definitely going through a conversion, and the logistics plays a side into that, just like it does all through ours. All right. With that, I'll hand it over to Sarah to go over climate.
I think, Sarah, you're on mute. You knew it was going to happen with one panel member, right?
Exactly. And I'm the newbie. Thank you so much. Thank you, Rudy. As he said, I'm the climate vertical market manager, and for all intents and purposes, the climate vertical is heating up, and there's a lot of exciting things that are happening. We have defined climate as not as HVAC, anything that is part of that, and also solar panels and wind, and eventually we're going to get to tapping into water treatment. So anything surrounding that'll affect the climate indoors and out. That's what this space we have as defined. So in the next 5 years, steady growth in non-residential construction will be one of the drivers for demand in the HVAC manufacturers, and its supporting parks. There's a lot of need of quick and constant innovation that's going to be expected due to the Department Energy directives for decarbonization, energy efficiency, and electrification. These are keeping the HVAC world on its toes. Not only are they expected to have new products to adhere or meet those goals that are being launched, but also parts or items that are going to be used to retrofit current systems, existing systems, to be in compliance with those codes that are changing pretty rapidly. This market also was going to continue to, again, be busy and profitable. Small fabricators that I've met over the last few months have backlogs all throughout the rest of the year and into Q1 of next year, and they don't see that letting up. Just to give you the size of what the HVAC industry is, in 2021, they posted a $50.8 billion revenue. So that's pretty huge.
Hey, Sarah, real quick question. So given that climate, I don't want to say it's a new thing, but it's definitely growing in popularity, regulatory matters, all aspects of the word. It's becoming a bigger deal. Do you find that the companies that are involved in this space who manufacture the types of products that are on our screen right now, do you find that they are more on the startup side, or are they more of our traditional manufacturers who are just evolving? Or do you see a company for both?
So both. The current traditional companies like Carrier and Lennox, they have a lot of resources and money and time invested in keeping up with the demands of what the DOE needs. For example, in 2023, the next 15%, the goal of another improved 15% efficiency in all their units is going to come into effect. The last one was in 2018, which was going to be 13%. That's just going to continue so that we can meet, the general population, the world society, can meet the decarbonization targets for 2035. And then that's just going to progress into 2050. So there are the current and old traditional companies that exist are keeping up with, again, innovation to keep up with those codes. And then also there are new companies that are coming up to get us ahead or move us forward, like your solar and your wind and your energy. That is, again, it's going to continue to be on growth mode. Did you know that in the United States, there's already 200 gigawatts of energy generated by solar panels and wind turbines? And that clean energy supplies 13.6% of electricity in the US already. And it hasn't even stopped. So to understand where this is further going, there's already another 124 gigawatts that's in the pipeline. And solar panel growth is 55% of that total. 20% is going to come from land-based wind. And then 14% of offshore wind turbines is going to be part of that 124 gigawatt growth. I was talking to a wind manufacturer, and that's where their focus is going to be here in the next couple of years, is the offshore growth, and they're going to be wanting to build that in the United States to support the need for that in the United States. I was sharing this with Amanda. I went to American Clean Power, not only to learn more about solar and wind, but the next step, and it's going to go into her emerging markets, is is the storage of it. So as these solar, wind, and also hydropower, and next is geothermal. All this is already happening as we're living our lives, and there's a lot happening in the background, and it has been going on for the last few years, 10 years, and it's caught up, it's here, it's ramping up quickly, but energy storage is the next one, because as more capacity comes on, we're going to need to have a place to store that to support the surges of heat. Someone had asked earlier about that, brownouts. They're preparing for that already. So let's see. So climate, like I said, manufacturers are going to need to be nimble, like I said, to meet the decarbonization targets for 2035 and into 2050. So overall, the opportunities in this vertical are promising and exciting. And if we want to be part of that growth, we got to get in the heat now. Otherwise, we're going to be left in the cold.
I love it. And yeah, great transition out of, some of the energy discussion points that I had made in my bit as well. So as we're looking at these products and we're thinking about this market, and the commodities or the metals that may go into it, certainly see like steel plate for the poles, for the wind towers. I've got to imagine a lot of copper wiring for the solar panels. What
And
other?
aluminum.
A lot of aluminum.
Extrusions for the solar panels, the frames,
Okay.
solar panels.
A lot of graphite, or what's the material that goes into the solar panel itself?
So no, I'm actually, there's lithium in that as well. So
Okay.
I'm not sure about the graphite, but I think you might be right. Still learning.
Lithium may in fact be a hot commodity going forward.
They are. I did remember that they're looking at alternatives to lithium, so that it can handle, because lithium can only handle so much. There's that new technology that they're looking at so that it can handle more and store more and get more energy out of it. So it's getting bigger and bigger.
Certainly sounds like a growing
With
world.
that, that's the perfect segue to Amanda and the emerging markets.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. So my name is Amanda Seabaugh. I'm the Director of Emerging Markets. My customers are electric vehicle manufacturers, which includes electric powertrain and chassis manufacturers, as well as commercial EV customers producing vans, buses, trucks for last mile and middle mile and Class 8, and then charging station manufacturers, and last but not least, battery OEMs. This grouping of customers is pretty unique because they are experiencing very high demand, and that demand is only expected to keep growing. There are two types of OEMs. There's legacy OEMs and then startups. Both are currently struggling with scaling their EV production for several reasons. One of the biggest roadblocks is the need for more domestic battery production. Within the next 3 years, we are going to see a huge domestic shortfall in raw materials, which will severely limit EV battery production, more specifically lithium. What's interesting is there's no real shortage of lithium. It's pretty much everywhere on Earth, but it's the extraction and refining of lithium that's too slow. We cannot get it fast enough to keep up with demand. So what do? We've got a few options. One is to increase investment in American battery manufacturing, R&D, and then another option is recycling. How many of us have an old smartphone sitting in your junk drawer, an old laptop that you just don't know what to do with? I have a few of those. So it's really exciting to think about this industry as a whole, in the large increase in domestic manufacturing that is going to be needed to get the United States to its goal of net zero emissions by 2050. So that's what we're working on.
No, it's really interesting. And again, not trying to pat ourselves on the back with Cup of Joe and some of the things we've put out, but certainly sounds like it has echoes to kind of the revenge of the old economy, investment in the manufacturing of goods, being more local. I think there are certainly some themes there that, even though these are very new emerging industries, they still require a lot of investment in things like mining and old school type processes.
Absolutely. And there are, go ahead, Mike.
Go ahead, Amanda. Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, Nick mentioned the mining. There's only one active mine for lithium in the United States, and that's in Nevada. And then there are lithium deposits in Carolina, which are being targeted as we speak by several companies to extract that lithium. So moving forward, it's just very, very, very slow.
What I was going to chime in, this is probably for both Amanda, you and Sarah. The questions are coming in, you know, with solar power, wind, electrification. Will labor shortages and lack of raw material hamstring these initiatives, or do you see that's a big issue on both fronts?
So let me answer a portion of that. Wind and I forgot, and solar. First of all, wind and solar costs have fallen, wind 47% and solar 71% respectively over the last 10 years. So that is becoming the most affordable source of energy in the US today. So, and that the extraction part of it, I'm looking at that question. The extraction part of it is really, it's pretty automatic. It's going to be the building of that. And unfortunately, solar panels, the majority is still being built in Asia. We're only seeing, someone asked about onshoring on that. I've seen one so far, and there's going to be more. And talking to some of the people, they said they have plans of building a solar panel manufacturer in California or somewhere else, you know, so that's coming, and wind's already been here. And so they have that infrastructure in place already to continue to build some more.
Perhaps question for everybody. This is kind of a broad one, but you know, in terms of our customers watching, you know, these four vertical markets, to the extent maybe, let's say, this is a hypothetical, let's say a customer wants to get into one of these you know, perhaps in niche markets, they want to expand or pivot their business. Do any of you offer services to kind of consult with them, or how exactly would that conversation operate within Ryerson and with regards to the metals that we could provide into their supply chain?
Yeah, so Nick, I'll just speak for myself, but I'm not an engineer, but we are making sure that we have the stock and fabrication capabilities available to help our customers grow in this market. So if it's, you know, copper bar, for example, that's going to be needed in certain applications, we're going to make sure we have it where our customers need it, and vice versa with, you know, pick your metal, anything.
Yeah, same. I've had conversations with customers and our sales folks in the Houston and Dallas area, and we're talking about what they need more, and we're talking to supply chain. Of course, we know if we're going to make sure that we have material that the customer needs. So,
and Nick, I'll add
talk about that.
In processing and packaging, one of the big key things is polished specialty metals, and so we also provide that as PEDs, so dairy grade polished metals, and tied them into some of our family of companies who are very good at doing that, providing that for them. So we set up those lines for them. And
Charles, with that seems like a perfect segue into your section. Let's go ahead and hop into it.
Well, I appreciate that. Hi, my name is Charlie Ziers. I'm the market manager for packaging and processing equipment. And I guess I'll begin by saying that the packaging industry has a strong correlation to consumer packaged goods, and CPG categories like food and beverage and pharmaceuticals being the kind of the three big guys on the block, and they make up over 60% of the overall market. But there are other categories, household goods, personal care items as well. And so what we see is overall consumer demand in those categories having a direct impact on manufacturing activity and packaging. And in addition to consumer demand, consumer preferences also has a big impact. So preferences like quantity and size configurations, flavor mixes and variety containers, even sustainability issues, right? We all want sturdy packaging with less waste. All of those preferences very quickly make their way upstream to the packaging OEMs and influence new machine design. They also surface in the form of upgrades and how those are integrated into existing production lines. So with that kind of in mind, when you look at top trends or top operational priorities for packaging, it always comes down to productivity and throughput. I mean, and it has been that way for several years. And I think one of the things not a lot of people think about is that there's been a lot of innovation and a lot of changes in how we not only receive our packaged goods, but what those packaged goods look like. And obviously one of the biggest changes that everyone's noticed, and you mentioned it earlier, is home deliveries, the Amazon effect, right? And so that's been a huge impact on the industry, and the industry has been reacting to those spikes in demands, those innovations, adjusting for materials and packaging designs that's more suitable for home deliveries. And they're doing all of that while they're still dealing with the labor and supply chain issues that everyone else has just mentioned, right? So the last few years in packaging has been challenging, but it's also been exciting. And I think going forward, we're going to see it's going to continue to be exciting, because I think we're definitely going to see an increased focus on technologies and automations, especially robotics. And that's certainly going to help with the productivity, but it's also going to help offset some of those labor challenges, which sounds like they may linger for a while.
Yeah. And Charlie, maybe you're one to kind of handle this question. This question came in from the audience for everybody. As you look at all your vertical spaces, are there glaring shortages that the U.S. must contend with in order to succeed? I imagine that means material shortages. Charlie, what are you seeing?
Not so much shortages as just extended lead times being an issue. It takes anywhere from 16 to 28 weeks to do some of these full production lines, but some of the smaller operations, a lot of the companies are trying to offset the supply chain issues by bringing in some of their A items. They're putting more floor stock on the floor to try to avoid some of those long-term outages.
Rudy, what are you seeing in heavy or distribution on that front?
To me, the primary limiter has been labor. As people are looking to, I would say, both reshore and nearshore. So as that starts playing into it, there is going to be requirements for material. It could be an AR 400 or a 500 Brunel plate that had been coming in as a component from Asia. Now all of a sudden we may be having to source that material here. So I think there'll be switches within the material side, but I'm not running into primarily shortages there. And we are helping with customers as they deal with the reshoring or nearshoring, and that we do have a Mexico supply chain that we can utilize to help them in that way if they choose not to do it themselves. So both those ways, but to me, the main one is labor.
I've got one final question for Sarah. On the climate side, so any of these materials, whether it's steel, aluminum, copper, whatever is going into the supply chain, are there additional requirements for how those products are produced? In other words, are there requirements that they have to be recycled or use a certain amount of fossil fuels to produce them? Or are there upstream requirements that are being mandated in order to kind of fulfill the overall climate landscape?
So mandated, not yet. But with all these companies, especially if they're public companies and they have ESG programs, they're going to be looking for that they're aligned with a supply chain who is carbon conscious, decarbonization conscious, and doing what their part in helping that. But mandating, not yet. But yes, they're talking about it.
Okay. Yeah, and I know that's something that Ryerson is looking at. Just real quick.
Oh yeah.
And I believe even many of our suppliers are also
correct
as well. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
we're jam packed here and kind of running up against the hour, but I'd like to know what's a key takeaway, or what's something that you're really looking at in the latter half of the year. We talked about a lot of things: labor shortages, material value add. What is the one thing, if you could say maybe you're kind of keeping an eye on for the next 6 months or so, seeing how that plays out. Amanda, maybe start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So our EV customers, a lot of customers are, we're starting to talk to them about 2023 supply, and a lot of them prefer to lock in contract supply agreements with Ryerson, so they have that warm and fuzzy that they're taking care of next year. So we're beginning to have those conversations with our customers.
Sarah, how about you?
There's a lot. I mean, where do you begin? I mean, a takeaway, I think, if we're looking at this in this market, in this industry, there's a lot happening in the background.
Mhm.
And so and I didn't realize this. I went to an ASHRAE conference where mostly the engineers and listening to what they're talking about, because I'm thinking if you're ahead of the game, they're looking at what the codes are and what they're looking for in the future is energy efficiency and electrification. That's a word that I used a lot. Everything electrification. They want the HVAC units to be now not using anything carbon, gas, related. So there's going to be a lot of movement towards that. And if you're looking at with these companies, we have to make sure that we listen to what they're saying and what their needs are and get ahead of it, because it's going to happen pretty fast. So we need to move fast along with them. So.
Okay, before we move on to Amanda, there's an add-on question from what you had just said. Are those customers looking to lock in more or less as a hedge for stability with less concern for price? So it's a question of kind of what they're looking to lock in.
Can you clarify that, Mike? They're looking.
Yeah, the question is, are the customers looking to lock in more or less as a hedge for is it more about a stability and with less a concern on price? Is it more of a stability issue than a price issue, is how I'm reading that?
Absolutely. A lot of our customers lock in their pricing to their customers for a year or a set amount of time. And so by signing a supply agreement, and if there's a hedge or a pricing agreement along with that, then they're able to firm up that price with their customers, and it protects them against the volatility of that market. So we do quite a bit of that, especially in the electric vehicle world.
Makes sense. Rudy, what are you watching here in the last few months of the year?
What I'm really starting to see is with all the reshoring, the nearshoring, the labor issues, customers are really taking a look at their supply chain to make sure it's still the optimal supply chain. Should they be bringing in raw materials? Should they be bringing in a first stage part? Should it be machined and formed? Should it be an assembly? So everybody is just kind of taking another look at their supply chain that's kind of driving through from the changes of the last couple of years. Last year wasn't the year to do it. Last year was the year to get product out the door and just manage your, the immediate. Whereas this year, I'm really seeing people kind of taking a second look at their supply chain and kind of reviewing with all those dynamics.
Rudy, I agree with you. Same in climate, for sure. And looking domestically.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Charlie, how about you bring us home on this one?
Yeah, so, the second half of the year, I think as demand maybe starts to slow down a little bit, packaging will be able to take a little breather in the industry on the productivity side and just trying to keep up with demand. And sustainability has always been a big focus in the packaging industry, especially in the beverage sector, because they are under a lot of pressure to meet sustainability goals and recyclable goals, and by both the consumer and state regulators. But I think as demand kind of slows down and we can take a breather, they're going to start bringing that up on the operational priority side. And I think technology is going to be a big part of that, because at the moment, it's just hard for these companies to hit these initiatives and make them scalable and cost effective for them. So I think it's going to take some breakthroughs in technology and maybe some integration of automation and some additional capital to make it happen. I will say that they are certainly committed to sustainability, and I think it's just really a matter of time, because I think everyone agrees that it's a good cause.
Yeah, great, very diverse markets, but some common themes, right? Supply chain, reshoring, value add. I mean, everyone's dealing with these, right? And there's nuances to the challenges in every market, but I think a lot can kind of share. I want to thank you all for joining. Nick, do you mind going to the next slide, as you have another panelist there joining you on screen?
Yeah, for everyone, this is Teddy, and he's very upset he's not part of the roundtable discussion.
But as you see here, we encourage you to reach out to our panel here for further discussion, any follow-up questions. Rudy, Sarah, Amanda, Charlie, thank you very much for joining. And like always, I'm going to leave the final word to Nick. But not before I say this happens the first Thursday of every month. We thank you for joining us. The full episode, as well as individual segments, will be available Ryerson's YouTube starting on Monday. Nick, any final words?
Yeah, no, I think as you had mentioned, even though we're talking about a lot of different diverse industries and maybe even sub-industries, I think you'll find that a lot of the things that were discussed in the second half of this podcast actually do reverberate with a lot of the things we've talked about in the first half or in prior Cup of Joes, which is, the need for investment in these types of economies to make things grow. Even though we're talking about electric vehicles, that at some stage requires investment in the supply side of the equation, whether it's digging a hole in the ground, getting more energy out of the ground, whatever it may be. All of these things are so interrelated, and yeah, I guess for the back half of the year and perhaps into next year, I think we're probably going to see an immense amount of volatility, perhaps in both directions. As China's reopening, perhaps we're seeing a slowdown in other parts of the economy. There's going to be a lot of choppiness, my instinct says, for commodity markets. So keep close with your salespeople. In terms of supply chain bottlenecks and issues, I don't think we're through all of these things yet. So much of the same message, really. And Teddy wants to say goodbye and thank you for joining as well.
Perfect ending. Thank you all.
Thank you.